The mansion was always silent. Though it was filled with light, gold, and marble, to the twins who lived there, it was a lonely cage. The millionaire, Alexander Reed, had built his empire through hard work and cold determination. He had no time for weakness, no space for vulnerability, and very little patience for anyone who couldn't keep up with his ruthless pace. But for all his wealth, there was one thing he could not fix: his twin children were born without the ability to hear. It broke his late wife, who had once dreamed of music echoing through the halls of their home. She wanted laughter, piano notes, songs, and bedtime stories. Instead, their lives became filled with therapists, doctors, sign language interpreters, and long silences. When she passed away 3 years ago, leaving Alexander with their 2 children, his mansion became darker than ever. He hired nannies, teachers, and caretakers, but no one stayed long. The twins were shy, withdrawn, and resistant to anyone who tried to reach them. Until one morning, when a new maid quietly walked into their lives. Her name was Clara. She wasn't from an agency, nor did she carry the polished confidence of experienced staff. She looked nervous, holding her resume in trembling hands when the house manager brought her in. She needed work badly, her family debts had nearly buried her, and she was willing to do anything, even clean a mansion she never imagined stepping inside. At first, Alexander didn't notice her. To him, she was just another face among dozens of employees. But to his twins, Liam and Lily, Clara became something else. One rainy afternoon, when Alexander returned earlier than usual, he walked quietly through the halls. He expected silence, maybe the twins sitting alone with their tablets. But as he approached the grand living room, he froze. There, in the center of the polished marble floor, Clara was twirling with the children. Music wasn't playing, but she had drawn it in the air. With graceful movements, she clapped, stomped, spun, and made gestures as if conducting an invisible orchestra. The twins followed her lead, their small feet moving, their hands waving, their laughter silent yet bright in their expressions. Clara mimicked instruments, pretended to play the violin, swayed like a singer, and the twins clapped in rhythm they felt rather than heard. Alexander stood hidden by the doorframe, stunned. His children, his silent, withdrawn children, were smiling. They were dancing. Clara wasn't teaching them music. She was teaching them joy. For the first time in years, Alexander's chest tightened with something other than grief. He had believed that wealth could provide everything: medical care, education, security. But watching Clara with his children made him realize how wrong he was. They didn't need more therapists. They needed love, patience, and someone who saw them not as broken but whole. When the dance ended, Clara bowed dramatically, and the twins clapped their hands in excitement, their faces glowing. They hadn't noticed their father watching. Later that night, Alexander called Clara into his study. She looked nervous, expecting reprimand for playing instead of working. But Alexander's voice was softer than usual. "What were you doing with them today?" he asked. Clara hesitated. I was just trying to help them feel music. I know they can't hear, but they can still experience rhythm, movement. Music isn't only sound, it's in the heart." Alexander stared at her, almost unable to process her words. For years, specialists had tried to approach his children with textbooks and rigid lessons. Yet here was a maid who understood what none of them did. Days turned into weeks, and Clara became an anchor in the twins' lives. She danced with them daily, introduced them to sign language games, taught them how to feel vibrations through instruments, and filled the mansion with laughter, not noise, but joy. Alexander found himself drawn to the living room more and more, just to watch. Each time, the sight of his children smiling shattered something cold inside him. But with that warmth came fear. Alexander was not a man who trusted easily. His empire had taught him to suspect motives, to guard his heart, and to hide his vulnerabilities. And Clara, for all her kindness, was still just an employee. Why did she care so much? One evening, after a particularly long meeting, Alexander came home exhausted. As he opened the door, he heard muffled sounds, thuds, faint stomps. Curious, he followed the noise. He found Clara dancing barefoot with the twins again, this time under the soft glow of the chandelier. The children were clinging to her hands, giggling without sound but with bright eyes. Clara's laughter echoed, soft and genuine, filling the empty mansion. Something inside Alexander broke. He realized he was falling, for her, for the woman who had walked into his home with nothing but a desperate need for work, yet managed to give his children what his millions could not. And yet, he was afraid. Afraid of losing control, afraid of opening his heart again after so much pain. The breaking point came one stormy night. Lily had a nightmare. Unable to hear thunder, she had felt the vibrations and flashes of lightning instead, which frightened her. She ran into Clara's room, trembling. Clara held her, soothing her with soft gestures, rocking her gently until she calmed down. Alexander arrived at the doorway, ready to take his daughter back, but stopped. Lily wasn't afraid anymore. In Clara's arms, she was safe. Tears he hadn't shed in years burned in Alexander's eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel, not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, but as a father desperate for his children's happiness. The next morning, he approached Clara. His voice was heavy, yet vulnerable. "I hired you as a maid. But you've given me more than I could ever repay. You've given my children life again." Clara shook her head gently. "I didn't give them anything they didn't already have. They just needed someone to see them." Alexander's chest ached. He realized that she had seen him too, not as the ruthless millionaire, but as a broken man who longed to love and be loved. What he saw next shattered his heart, not in pain, but in the overwhelming realization of what he had been missing. His children needed Clara, and maybe, so did he. That night, instead of retreating into his office, Alexander joined Clara and the twins in their dance. Awkward at first, stumbling, out of rhythm, but as his children laughed silently and Clara smiled at him, Alexander felt something he thought was lost forever. Hope. And love.